this new law is a farce. It's a joke, but it can be very dangerous. You see, human trafficking is against the law in Hungary, and it has always been. So there was no need for a new legislation of pointing the fingers at those who would help illegal migration, because you don't really know what that means. There's a new amendment to the Hungarian constitution now, which says that you can't be a fugitive if you arrive from a country which is secure. So it means that if you come from Serbia, you can't be a fugitive. That means that that on the border no one can help you. And actually, if you say someone which direction is Budapest, it could mean that you are arrested by the police. But how should you know as a civilian who's an illegal migrant and who is, let's say, a Serbian guy who just wants to visit Budapest? So this law is actually a joke, and we are very much afraid that it can be turned against anyone. You see, in that law, they sanction people who write in a positive manner about migration. This, in an extreme situation, can be used against media as well. So, you know, it's a stupid and very dangerous law, and nobody knows what the outcome going to be. And we see what's happening in Europe. We see what's happening with Salvini. We see what's happening with Austria and Bavaria. And we don't really think that Orban will be punished for this senseless law.
Okay, and one other thing is that recently the Interior Minister justified the legislation, saying that the Hungarian people rightfully expect the government to use any means necessary to stop Hungary from becoming a country of immigrants. So, as a member of the European Union and the United Nations, does this mean that Hungary is releasing itself from the international obligations? And can we really talk about the possible Huxit, the succession from the EU?
Well, you see how the EU is right now developing in a way that Mr. Orban likes. It's developing to be a continent and a union which turns its back to the world. So I don't think that there's going to be major retributions to the Hungarian government because of this law. This law really doesn't protect anyone, because all the means to protect our borders were there before. You know, that it's not a question of NGOs helping a few people. You know, we have border patrol, we have laws against trafficking. There was no real aim to do this new legislation, and it won't make us any safer. It is just, you know, a propaganda tool for Mr. Orban to use within Hungary and to brag in Europe. It is a provocation, and the one real threat here is that it can be used in the future against people who would, you know, who would, in the eyes of Mr. Orban, threaten his power.
So, talking about the name of the legislation itself, the Stop Soros Act. So Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban has numerously accused George Soros and his Open Society Foundation of promoting mass migration against the will of the Hungarian people. So how is the country changing with Soros's foundation closing its Budapest office?
Well, let's start with the name Stop Soros, or as we pronounce it. It's cynical and it's a lie. It won't stop Mr. Soros because he is simply not involved. Two, Mr. Soros saying the same as Mr. Orban, that no country should be forced to invite and welcome refugees, that the mass migration is a huge threat to the European Union because it stops the solidarity from within. I think the offices of Mr. Soros being moved from Budapest to Berlin is a scream, a way to say help from the foundation, to a consequence of the politics in Budapest. You must understand, Mr. Soros is not leaving any projects he is funding here in Budapest. He is only taking out the parts of the office which is working worldwide. So till today, let's say someone from Chile helped the health care in Tanzania and was working from a Budapest office. He's going to work now from a Berlin office. This makes Budapest a bit weaker because a lot of money leaves Budapest with it, but actually there's no direct threat to the Hungarian NGOs and no direct gain for Mr. Orban.
And within the recent few years, Mr. Orban also tightened the state control over the media, the major business sectors, and set up a new judicial branch that critics say may increase the political influence over the judges. Is the country's power being abused?
Well, NGOs call it a state grab, and they estimate that the judiciary was the last branch which was free of a total political influence. Partly they've been invaded, but a huge part of the judiciary stayed independent over the last 8 years. This is the last fortress, let's say, which they want to invade, and it seems like that they are now preparing for the last strike. It's going to be grim because these new courts are going to rule in any cases where a citizen of Hungary is in quarrel with the state. So this is mainly state against the people. And this is where they are building up new courts. It doesn't sound good. And the other problem is that in a lot of cases, new judges are going to be recruited from within the administration. So that means that in questions of taxation, someone from the tax authority who worked there yesterday going to be judged today and going to judge perhaps over his own decision or the decision of his former colleagues. I think it's a dangerous path. It shows how legislation can turn against the citizens of Hungary.